The U.S. Coast Guard says that it is bringing in more ships and underwater vessels to search for a lost deep-sea submersible in the North Atlantic. Underwater noises could be coming from the missing sub with 5 people on board. Now, the vessel was taking tourists on Sunday to the wreckage site of the Titanic. It could be almost 4 kilometers underwater. That's about 2.5 miles off the coast of Canada. Aircraft using sonar have been trying to pinpoint its location, and a submarine team is hoping to attempt a rescue. The submersible is carrying 4 passengers and a pilot. Now, in a press conference, a Coast Guard spokesperson said that the exact location and source of the sounds has not been determined, but it has allowed researchers to focus on a more narrowly defined area. Take a listen.
Yesterday, a Canadian P-3 detected underwater noises in the search area. As a result, ROV operations were relocated in an attempt to explore the origin of the noises. Although the ROV searches have yielded negative results, they continue. Additionally, the data from the P-3 aircraft has been shared with our U.S. Navy experts for further analysis, which will be considered in future search plans. The surface search is now approximately 2 times the size of Connecticut, and the subsurface search is up to 2.5 miles deep, exponentially expanding the size of the search area.
Well, rescuers remain optimistic and hopeful, but with the tanks of oxygen slowly emptying, the crew is expected to run out of breathable air as early as Thursday morning.
Time is running out for the 5 people on board the submersible, and conditions for the search are far from ideal.
We've had one of the worst springs on record, the worst spring since 1943, which of course is bad enough being on land. It's absolutely terrible being 600 kilometers off our shores. We're talking, 12-foot waves, heavy fog, very difficult search and rescue conditions.
The search is being coordinated in Boston in the US. There is still hope. Rescue teams are thought to have detected a knocking sound once every half hour, a possible sign of life and pointer to where the craft might be. The big fear is that the Titan submersible is on the ocean floor. The Titanic itself is lying 3,800 meters below the surface, in absolute darkness and under enormous pressure from the water above.
So the opportunities for finding them in a mangled wreck within the next 36 hours, I think, are practically impossible.
It's still not clear exactly what went wrong and why the submersible is missing. Oceanographer Jules Jaffe believes there are 2 possibilities.
Yes, it's either a mechanical failure or an electrical failure. And I'm hoping it's an electrical failure because they do have weights. One of the safety procedures that they have is to make themselves lighter. So if you're heavier than the water, you sink. If you're lighter than the water, you float.
The expedition operators, OceanGate, have been widely criticized. Long before Titan's disappearance, experts worried about safety.
But we knew this was going to happen at some point along the way, and knew darn well it would. And we knew all the difficulties there would be about how do you recover from that. If the sub is stuck on a shipwreck, if they lose batteries, if they're caught on the bottom some other way. And nothing was done about it.
Rescue teams are still hoping for a favorable outcome, but a search and rescue operation at this depth has never before been attempted.
The German entrepreneur Arthur Loibl took a trip on board the same kind of submersible back in 2021. That's him, you see there on the right, along with French Navy diver Paul-Henri Nargeolet on the left, and the boss of the company, OceanGate Stockton Rush, in the middle there, both of whom were on the vessel that went missing on Sunday. Arthur, it's good to have you with us. You were on this submersible 2 years ago. Now, the 2 people that you traveled with, they have gone missing. And how does this make you feel?
That makes me very sad. I feel very bad, especially on Saturday. I was in contact with Rush via email. He told me the situation that on Sunday he will start the last dive this year, the last possibility to dive, because before he had no chance due to the weather condition. And we were talking about new projects in 2024. And then I cannot answer him because he's going down with the sub and now he's missing. And PH, the French guy, is very friendly. He was a great guy. And to know that these two people, the three unknown people, makes me very sad.
And the last communication you had, did he say anything about being concerned about the vessel, the Titan, not functioning properly?
Nothing about the vessel. He was talking about the very bad weather condition, because it must be one of the worst spring winter time in Newfoundland. I thought said he was not possible to make dives before. He was telling me via email.
We have learned in the last 2 days that there were serious questions about the safety of this vessel. I mean, you went down to the Titanic wreckage site. When you did that, did you feel unsafe at all?
No, not at this time. I don't feel. I feel very safe. My thinking was, my meaning was, hopefully we came down, because the dives before, they have to stop maybe by 1,600 meters due to the problems with the battery systems. I was not afraid to die. I was afraid that we cannot reach the button. Today, 2 years later, with the knowledge of 2022 and know what happened, my meaning is totally changed.
Yeah, I mean, so you're saying there were some problems with your vessel. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Right. It was the last possibility to dive in 2021. Yeah. We should start at 5 a.m. or 5 or 6 a.m. And we have been also delayed for 4 or 5 hours because they have the same problems with charging the battery with the electrical systems. And then when we drop to the water, they have pipes on the side of the sub for make the sub in a right position. One of these pipes was falling down. We should be inside the sub during the repairing. And the repairing was with plastic holders. It looks a little bit simple. Yeah. After now it's. I think it was really dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, were you convinced that the pilot of the vessel, that pilot was highly qualified and that the vessel was in top condition?
Yeah, I can say Stockton was qualified, and he makes a very safe. He was very safe. He was very quiet, and I can agree that he was a good guy to make this dive. But I think the equipment was not the best.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, what you're thinking may actually be the case. The world is waiting to find out and hoping that there will be a positive ending to this. Mr. Loibl, we appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good night. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Simon Boxall is a senior lecturer in oceanography at the National Oceanography Centre at the University of Southampton. Welcome to DW. Could you explain to our viewers what's making it so hard to find this sub?
It's, to start with, in very deep water. You know, we're looking at 3.5 to 4 kilometres down. And although they knew exactly where it went in and they knew where it was heading to, bear in mind at that depth of fall, if it lost power or lost motive force, it'll glide as it sinks down towards the seabed. And you can imagine a glider up in the air, falling down towards the earth. It can travel an awful long distance horizontally before it finally lands. Add to that some quite complex ocean currents in that area, which means that the search area becomes really quite large. Now, they did have sort of contact with the sub for the first nearly 2 hours when it went into the water, but then rapidly lost contact. Whether that was because of equipment failure, whether that was because the sub had sunk and ended up with the sort of, if you like, the transponder, the thing sending out the sound stuck into the sediments, we don't know. Now, the latest sort of hope is that these listening devices that the Canadian Coast Guard put into the water are picking up what seems to be a sort of a pattern of sound. It could be a number of things, but it could be sort of people within the sub trying to raise a distress call. And the time will be about right, because people on board will have enough experience to know there was no point in doing that in the first couple of days. It would take that long before equipment was in place to try and track the sub. So the timing is about right. And by the sounds of it, the Canadian Coast Guard have some degree of confidence it's coming from the sub. That means they can hone the search area down a bit. We're talking at about half the size of Belgium. It might end up being sort of the size of a large city, somewhere like London or somewhere like that. But that's still a very large area to search. So, if this was happening where we had weeks to do the search, one would be optimistic. But this is a rescue mission, and the time for rescue is running out.
Exactly. We're working against the clock. And the thing is, if you do find them, if you do find this sub, how on earth do you get it back up to the surface if it's so far down?
It depends on the condition. Now, the positive things are that there's a number of vessels that have arrived in the last sort of 12, 24 hours that can help with this. The problem up to now has been that they haven't had the necessary equipment or vessels to then undertake the recovery. They had a French vessel, the Atlantique research vessel, which arrived last night, and that has a deep sea ROV, remotely operated vehicle, which can go down to 6,000 meters, so plenty of capacity. The American equivalent has arrived there in the last few hours. So there are a couple of vessels on site which have the ability to send a robot down, which could, if the conditions are right, put a sort of a line onto the sub if they can find it. And this is the big thing. They've got to find it first before we even think about what sort of rescue mission is possible. If it's got embedded in something, if it's got tangled, then the whole thing becomes a lot more complex. We just have to wait and see.
OK, it's going to be an anxious wait and see for families, of course. Simon Boxall, thank you very much for filling us in with those details. Senior lecturer at oceanography at the University of Southampton.